Chapter 1. The voice that should not exist. The voice came at twilight. When the world held its breath between day and night, Alara first heard it 3 weeks ago. Standing at the edge of her grandmother's grave, a whisper threaded through the wind, low and ancient, speaking a name she hadn't used since childhood. She'd convinced herself it was grief playing tricks, her mind unraveling after months of loss, betrayal, and the slow dissolution of everything she'd built. But the voice came again, and again, always at dusk, always when she was alone. Tonight, it found her in the ruins of Stiti, Morwen's chapel, where crumbling stone arches framed a sky bleeding purple and gold. She'd come here to escape the pitying stares of her former neighbors, the whispers that followed her through the market square. Poor Alara, jilted at the altar. Her fiancé ran off with the merchant's daughter. Such a scandal. She pressed her palm against the cold chapel wall, feeling the grooves of forgotten prayers carved into the stone. The air smelled of moss and old rain. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled low, mournful, marking the hour when decent folk locked their doors and lit their lamps. Alara, her breath caught, the voice slid through the shadows like silk over skin, intimate and impossible. Not a shout, not a whisper, something in between, as if spoken directly into the hollow of her chest. Who's there? Her voice cracked, too loud in the empty ruins. Silence answered. The kind of silence that pressed against eardrums, alive with waiting. She turned slowly, scanning the broken pews and shattered windows. Nothing moved. No footsteps, no rustle of fabric. Just the wind sighing through gaps in the stone, carrying the scent of night blooming jasmine from the overgrown garden beyond. Come to me. This time, the words pulled. Not a command exactly, more like a hook embedded beneath her ribs, tugging her toward the chapel's eastern wing where the old crypt entrance yawned open. The iron gate had rusted off its hinges years ago, leaving a mouth of darkness that no one in the village dared approach after sunset. Alara's pulse hammered against her throat. Every instinct screamed to run, to flee back to her rented room above the bookshop and bolt the door. But something else rose up inside her, a desperate, reckless thing, born from too many nights lying awake, wondering if the rest of her life would be this small, this suffocating. She'd already lost everything that mattered. What did she have left to fear? Her fingers found the candle in her pocket, always carried now, since the nights had grown long and strange. She lit it with trembling hands, the flame casting wild shadows across her face. Then she stepped toward the crypt. The stone stairs descended into earth and cold. Each step echoed, swallowed by the dark. The walls narrowed, pressing close, and the air grew thick with the smell of damp stone and something else, something mineral and sharp, like blood left too long in the sun. At the bottom, the passage opened into a chamber, and there, in the center, stood a man. No, not a man. Something wearing the shape of one. He was tall, impossibly still, dressed in black that seemed to drink the candlelight. His face could have been carved from marble, beautiful in the way cold things are beautiful, all sharp angles and bloodless perfection. Dark hair fell to his shoulders, and his eyes burned, not with fire, but with something colder. Silver, bright and ancient, fixed on her with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. You came. His voice matched the one from her dreams, from the twilight whispers. Low and controlled, each word precisely weighted. I wasn't certain you would. Alara's hand shook, wax dripping onto her fingers. Who are you? Someone who should not have called you. He moved then a fraction of an inch, but it sent ice down her spine. Too smooth, too fluid, like water taking human shape. Someone who broke laws older than your language to speak your name. Why? The word came out smaller than she intended. His gaze traveled over her face, studying her with an attention that felt invasive, hungry. Because I heard you screaming in silence. Because for 3 months your grief has echoed through the spaces between worlds where old things still listen. He paused, something flickering behind his perfect mask. Because you called to me first, even if you didn't know what you were doing. I never. Every night you wished for oblivion. Every night you stood at that grave and begged for an ending. His voice dropped lower, intimate and terrible. I am very, very good at granting such requests. The candle nearly slipped from her grip. She should run, should scream. But her feet had grown roots, and her voice had forgotten how to form anything but his question. What are you? Old. A bitter smile curved his mouth, revealing teeth just slightly too sharp. Tired, bound by oaths I cannot break, and hungers I cannot silence. He took one step forward, and Alara's back hit the stone wall. And now apparently, foolish enough to summon a mortal woman into my sanctuary because I could not bear the sound of her dying heart one moment longer. My heart isn't, it is. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough for her to see the inhuman stillness of his chest, the absence of breath. I can hear it even now, struggling, fighting. You're drowning in daylight, Alara Thorne, and you don't even know you're underwater. Tears burned behind her eyes. She refused to let them fall. You don't know me. I know you were supposed to marry Thomas Garrett. I know he left you at St. Catherine's altar with 200 witnesses and your dead grandmother's ring. I know you sold everything to pay his debts, only to discover he'd been stealing from you for years. His silver eyes never wavered. I know you wake at 3 in the morning and cannot breathe. I know you smile at the baker because you don't want him to worry. I know. You're 26 years old, and you already feel ancient. The candle went out. Darkness swallowed them whole except for his eyes, still burning in the black. Let me offer you something, he said softly, terribly. Not oblivion. Something else entirely. What? She whispered. A choice. Chapter 2. The bargain written in blue. Alara's breath came in shallow gasps, the only sound in the suffocating darkness. She couldn't see her own hands, couldn't orient herself in the void, but she felt him, a presence that radiated cold like winter stone. A choice, she repeated, her voice steadier than she expected. What kind of choice? A spark of light bloomed between them, not from candle or torch, but from his palm. Blue-white flame danced across his skin without burning, casting his face in ghostly relief. The impossible fire should have terrified her. Instead, she found herself leaning forward, drawn to its strange warmth, the kind that cannot be unmade once spoken. He moved closer, the flame illuminating carved symbols on the chamber walls, spirals and sigils that seemed to writhe in the shifting light. There is a war coming, Alara, between houses older than your kingdom's first stone. I am caught in the center of it, and I am. He paused, something raw flickering across his perfect features. Weakened. Houses? She forced her mind to work through the fear. You're speaking in riddles, vampire houses, he said it simply, watching her face. We are not the mindless creatures from your village tales. We are nations unto ourselves, bound by blood, oaths, and ancient law. I am Cashan Aldrich, Lord of House Noctis, or what remains of it. Bitterness edged his words. And 3 nights ago, assassins from House Morrigan poisoned me with nightshade blessed by a dead saint. Alara's hand instinctively went to her throat. Vampires can be poisoned? When the poison is steeped in holy relics, and fed to us in the blood of willing martyrs. A dark smile. Yes, we burn from the inside, slowly. Our strength bleeds away with each sunset until we're too weak to wake. And then he stopped, jaw tightening. Then House Morrigan claims our territory, our bloodbound servants, our seat on the Night Council. Why are you telling me this? The question came out sharper than intended, laced with the exhaustion of too many lies, too many secrets kept from her until it was too late to matter. Why bring a stranger into your war? Because you are not a stranger. Cashan's flame flickered, casting shadows that made his eyes look hollow. You have walked through my dreams for 3 months. Your blood calls to mine in ways that should be impossible. You are human, unbound, no vampire mark upon you. Yet I taste your name on every breath I do not take. Horror and something else, something dangerous and fluttering twisted in her chest. That's insane. Yes, he didn't look away. It is also true. The old magic recognizes you, and I am old enough to trust what the magic knows. He extended his empty hand, palm up. I need shelter. A place where House Morrigan will not think to look. Somewhere consecrated ground still holds meaning, where I might rest and purge the poison before it consumes me entirely. The chapel, understanding dawn cold and clear. St. Morwin's is still holy ground. They won't cross it. Not without invitation. Not without breaking older laws than even we dare violate. His hand remained steady, waiting. But I cannot walk those halls alone. The blessing would burn me as surely as the poison. I need someone living, someone pure of the blood curse, to grant me sanctuary. Pure? A bitter laugh escaped her. I'm nobody's definition of pure. Pure of vampire blood, he clarified. Never bitten, never bound, never touched by our world. His gaze intensified. You are exactly what I need, Alara Thorne. And in exchange, I offer you what you've been searching for since you stood at that altar and watched your life crumble. What could you possibly purpose? The word cut through her protest like a blade. Protection. Answers to questions you haven't learned to ask yet. He stepped closer, the blue flame dying to embers. And when this is over, when House Morgan is defeated and I reclaim what they've tried to steal, I will give you a choice. To return to your small room and smaller life, with enough gold to rebuild whatever you wish. Or, her heart hammered against her ribs, or to step into a world that will never bore you, never betray you, never leave you wondering if you matter. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I offer you the truth that your grief already knows. The daylight world has nothing left for you. But the night might have everything. Silence stretched between them, weighted with impossible things. Alara's mind raced through the insanity of it all: vampires, houses, blood oaths, wars fought in shadows while the village slept. Every rational thought screamed that he was mad, or she was, or both, but rationality hadn't saved her, hadn't stopped Thomas from stealing her grandmother's inheritance, hadn't kept her neighbors from treating her like something broken and pitiful, hadn't made the mornings any easier to face. What do you need me to do? She heard herself ask. Something shifted in Cashin's expression: relief perhaps, or hunger carefully leashed. Come with me now. Shelter me in the chapel's eastern wing, where the old priest's quarters still stand. Let no one enter without your permission. Feed me. He hesitated. I will need blood to heal. Not yours, he added quickly, seeing her face. I have reserves, stored. But you would need to assist. Assist how? Hold the vessel. Keep watch while I'm vulnerable during daylight. Tend wounds that will open as the poison works its way out. His jaw tightened. It will not be pleasant. I will not be the composed creature you see now. The purging will make me. He stopped, searching for words. Monstrous. More than I already am. Alara looked at his outstretched hand, still waiting in the darkness. She thought of her empty room, her hollow days, the weight of waking up to nothing that mattered. She thought of a voice that had called her name when no one else remembered she existed. How long? She asked. How long would I need to hide you? 7 days. Perhaps 10, if the poison is deeper than I fear. And if House Morgan finds us? Then you run. No hesitation. You leave me and you run, and you never speak of this again. She almost laughed. That's a terrible bargain. It's the only one I have. His hand remained steady. What do you say, Alara Thorne? Will you grant me sanctuary? The weight of the choice pressed down on her, this strange, terrible, impossible choice. But wasn't that what she'd been begging for in the dark? A way out, a way through, a way to anything other than slow suffocation. She reached out and clasped his hand. His skin was cold as winter midnight. And the moment their palms touched, the chamber blazed with blue light, symbols on the walls igniting like stars, blazing bright enough to sear her vision. Cashin's grip tightened, and she felt something pass between them. Not pain, but recognition. As if her blood had been waiting centuries to remember his. It's done, he whispered. You're bound to my sanctuary now. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Alara looked into his burning silver eyes and wondered what exactly she'd just agreed to. Chapter 3. Wounds that bleed. Silver. The walk back through the crypt felt different with Cashin beside her. The darkness no longer pressed with menace, it simply was, and he moved through it like something native to shadow. Alara had relit her candle, but its meager flame seemed unnecessary. She could sense him in the dark, a cold current in still water, guiding her up the stone steps without a word. When they emerged into the chapel ruins, full night had fallen. Stars scattered across the sky like broken glass, and the moon hung low and swollen, painting everything in shades of silver and ash. Cashin stopped at the threshold. His hand braced against the crumbling doorframe. For the first time since she'd met him, uncertainty crossed his features. I need your invitation, he said quietly. Speak it clearly. Say that I am welcome within these walls, that you grant me sanctuary as the living guardian of this holy place. Alara hesitated, the weight of ritual pressing down on her. I'm not a priest. I have no authority. You are human, breathing, and standing on consecrated ground of your own free will. That is all the authority the old laws require. His jaw tightened, and she saw a tremor run through him, the first crack in his perfect control. Please, the poison is moving faster now that I've used magic. I don't have much time. She took a breath and spoke the words, feeling them settle into the air like stones dropping into deep water. Cashin Aldrich, Lord of House Noctis, I welcome you within these walls. I grant you sanctuary as guardian of St. Morwen's chapel. Enter freely, and be sheltered here. The change was immediate. The invisible barrier she hadn't even known existed shimmered and parted, and Cashin stumbled forward as if shoved. He caught himself against a broken pew, breathing hard or mimicking breath. She couldn't tell which. The eastern wing, he managed. Quickly, Alara led him through the nave, past shattered saints and birds' nests built in holy alcoves, to where the old priest's quarters huddled against the chapel's eastern wall. The door hung crooked on its hinges, but the room beyond was surprisingly intact: a narrow bed, a wooden table, shuttered windows that still held glass. Cashin made it 3 steps inside before his legs gave out. She caught him, or tried to. He was heavier than he looked, solid as marble, and they went down together in a tangle of limbs and hissed curses. The candle flew from her hand, rolling across the floor, its flame somehow staying lit. "I'm sorry," he gasped against her shoulder. "I'm the poison, stop talking." Alara extricated herself and grabbed the candle, bringing it close to see him properly. What she saw made her stomach clench. Black veins had begun to spread across his throat, creeping up from beneath his collar like dark roots. His skin, already pale, had taken on a gray cast that looked wrong even in the uncertain light. And his eyes, those burning silver eyes, had dimmed to something closer to ash. "What do I do?" She hated the panic in her voice, but she'd agreed to help and had no idea how. "You said you had reserves. Blood. Where?" "Coat pocket." His hand fumbled at his chest. "Inside. Glass vials. I need 2, maybe 3. She found them, small crystal vials filled with dark liquid that looked black in the candlelight. Her hands shook as she uncorked the first one. The smell hit her immediately. Copper and salt. And something else. Something that made her hindbrain scream predator. "How do I should I?" She stopped, realizing she was asking how to feed a vampire. The absurdity would have made her laugh if she weren't so terrified. "Help me sit." Cashin's voice had weakened, each word costing him. "Against the wall. Then, just hold it to my mouth. My body will do the rest." It took all her strength to drag him upright and prop him against the stone wall. His head lolled back, exposing the black veins spreading up his jaw like cracks in porcelain. She knelt beside him, uncorked vial clutched in trembling fingers. "This is insane," she muttered. "Yes," a ghost of his earlier smile. "But you chose insanity. Too late for regrets." She pressed the vial to his lips, tipping it slowly. The blood, she refused to think about whose blood, where it came from, disappeared instantly. His throat worked, swallowing, and for a moment nothing happened. Then his entire body convulsed. Alara jerked back as Cashin doubled over, choking. Black liquid poured from his mouth, not blood, but something thicker, tarry, reeking of raw and sanctified herbs. It splattered across the floor, hissing where it landed, eating into the old wood like acid. "The poison," he gasped between heaves. "Coming out." More blood. Quickly she grabbed the second vial with shaking hands and repeated the process. This time she was ready when his body rebelled, when more black poison purged from his system in violent waves. She held his shoulder, kept him from collapsing face first into the spreading pool of corruption, and tried not to think about what it meant that vampire blood could burn through solid wood. The third vial went down easier. By the fourth she'd opened it without asking. His convulsions had subsided to shudders, and the black veins on his throat had receded slightly, retreating toward his chest. "Enough," he whispered. "Save the rest. I'll need more at dawn." Alara sat back on her heels, breathing hard. Her dress was splattered with black poison and regular blood. She'd cut her palm somewhere. In the chaos, and her entire body trembled with adrenaline. Crash. Cashin's eyes had regained some of their silver light. He watched her with an expression she couldn't read: gratitude, perhaps, mixed with something more complicated. "You didn't run," he said softly. "You told me to run if House Morgan found us. Not if you started vomiting demon poison." She wiped her bloody palm on her already ruined skirt. "There's a difference." "Is there?" He tilted his head, studying her. "Most humans flee from what I am, even without the charming display of internal decay. Most humans haven't spent 3 months wishing for something to break the monotony." She met his gaze steadily. "Even if that something is a dying vampire and his supernatural poison." "Not dying," he said it firmly. "Purging. There's a difference." "Is there?" She threw his words back at him, and was rewarded with a genuine smile, brief, but real. "Touch." He shifted against the wall, wincing. "I'll need to rest now. Daylight comes in a few hours, and when it does, I'll be vulnerable, completely unconscious, unable to wake even if the chapel burns." His eyes grew serious. "If anyone comes, Alara, anyone at all, you must send them away. No matter what they say, what they offer, what they threaten, House Morgan, or their agents. They'll be searching for me, and they're not stupid. It won't take long for them to realize I've taken sanctuary somewhere holy. He reached out, his cold fingers brushing her wrist. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't trust anyone who comes asking questions about strangers or nobles, or I promise. She covered his hand with hers, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. I'm good at being invisible. It's practically my only skill these days. I doubt that very much. His eyes drifted closed, exhaustion finally claiming him. But I'm grateful for it nonetheless. Within minutes, his breathing, or the approximation of it, had slowed to something deep and rhythmic. Alara watched him sleep, this impossible creature who'd called her name across the dark, and wondered what dawn would bring. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters, and somewhere in the village below, a clock tower chimed midnight, the beginning of the first day, and 6 more to go. Chapter 4. The habits of the undead. Alara didn't sleep. She sat with her back against the opposite wall, watching Cashin's motionless form as gray light slowly bled through the shuttered windows. The black poison on the floor had stopped hissing, leaving scorched marks that looked like strange script or warnings. As the first true rays of sun pierced the gaps in the shutters, something changed. Cashin went absolutely, utterly still. Not the stillness of sleep, but of death. No rise and fall of chest, no flutter of pulse at his throat, no movement whatsoever. If she hadn't watched him slip into the state, she would have sworn she was sitting across from a corpse. The wrongness of it crawled across her skin. She forced herself to stand, to move, to check the shutters and make certain no direct sunlight could reach him. The old priest had been thorough heavy wood, thick enough to block the day, but she found rags, and stuffed them into every crack, every seam, until the room existed in permanent twilight. Only then did she allow herself to look at him properly. In the dim light, Cashin looked younger somehow. The sharp control that had defined his features had melted away, leaving something almost peaceful. Beautiful, in the way marble statues were beautiful, perfect and untouchable, and profoundly lonely. Black veins still threaded beneath his skin, fainter now but unmistakably present. His hands lay open at his sides, palms up, vulnerable in a way she suspected he never allowed while conscious. What are you? She thought. Not for the first time. What have I invited into my life? A knock at the chapel's main door shattered the silence. Alara's heart lurched. She glanced at Cashin, still death still, utterly unreachable, then moved quietly through the priest's quarters and into the nave. Through the broken windows, she could see a figure standing at the entrance. Respectable and patient in the morning light, she recognized him immediately. Father Benedict from the village church. His round face creased with concern. Miss Thorne? His voice carried through the ruins. I saw candle smoke last evening. Are you taking shelter here? Every instinct screamed caution, but she couldn't hide forever, and acting suspicious would only draw more attention. She stepped into view, making sure to look exhausted and embarrassed. Father Benedict, I'm sorry. I needed somewhere quiet to think. His expression softened. My dear child, this place isn't safe. The structure isn't sound, and there have been reports of, he paused delicately, unsavory characters passing through at night. I'm careful, she assured him. I only came at dusk, and left before dark. A lie. But he didn't need to know that. Still, I worry. He stepped closer to the threshold, and Alara fought the urge to move between him and the eastern wing. Perhaps you might return to the village proper? Mrs. Hemlock has expressed interest in hiring help at the inn. Honest work, decent lodging, pity work. Alara thought bitterly. Charity for the jilted girl. That's kind of her, she said carefully. I'll consider it. Father Benedict's gaze drifted past her shoulder, toward the priest's quarters. Have you seen anyone else about? There was a traveler asking questions yesterday. A nobleman or so he claimed. Tall, dark-haired. Looking for. He trailed off, watching her face. Alara's blood went cold. She kept her expression carefully neutral. Looking for what? A friend, he said. Someone who might have taken ill and sought sanctuary in abandoned holy places. Father Benedict's eyes sharpened slightly. Strange question to ask, don't you think? Very strange. She forced a puzzled frown. I haven't seen anyone. Just ruins and birds. The priest studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded, apparently satisfied. If you do see this traveler or anyone suspicious, please inform me immediately. The stranger had an unsettling quality. Something not quite right. You have no idea, Alara thought. Of course, father. Thank you for your concern. He blessed her and departed, his footsteps crunching through the overgrown path. Alara waited until he'd disappeared completely before releasing her held breath and returning to the priest's quarters. Cashin remained exactly as she'd left him, a statue. A corpse, something caught between worlds. House Morrigan is already searching, she whispered to his unhearing form. You were right. They're not stupid. The day stretched endlessly. Alara found a mostly clean cloth and cleaned the poison from the floor as best she could, though the scorched wood remained. She inventoried Cashin's remaining blood vials, 5 left, and tried not to think about what would happen if they ran out. She explored the chapel grounds, learning every exit, every hiding place, every angle of approach. If enemies came, she needed to know the terrain. By afternoon, exhaustion finally claimed her. She meant to rest for only a moment, but when she opened her eyes again, the light had shifted to late afternoon gold, and Cashin was watching her, not moving, still locked in his day death, but his eyes had opened slightly, silver slits tracking her movements. The effect was deeply unsettling, consciousness without animation. Can you hear me? She asked softly, the barest flicker in those eyes. Yes. Father Benedict came this morning. And there's someone in the village asking about you. A nobleman, he said. Another flicker. This time it felt like anger. Do you know who it is? The third flicker came with the tiniest movement of his jaw, as if he were fighting the day paralysis through sheer will. His lips barely moved, but she heard the whisper. Kieran, is he House Morgan? My brother. Alara sat back, absorbing this. Your brother is trying to kill you? The ghost of a bitter smile touched his frozen features. Politics, older than your kingdom. Each word cost him enormous effort. Don't trust him. Charming, liar, dangerous. More dangerous than you? His eyes met hers fully, and she saw ancient pain flicker in their depths. Yes. Then the sun shifted, a ray of light breaching her makeshift barriers, and Cashin's eyes slammed shut as if burned. His entire body seized a silent convulsion that lasted 3 eternal seconds before he went utterly still again. Alara lunged forward, checking the shutters. A gap had opened where the rags had slipped. She stuffed it frantically, blocking the treacherous light, her heart hammering. When she looked back, he was death still once more, completely unreachable. I'm sorry, she whispered, though he couldn't hear. I'll be more careful. She spent the remaining daylight hours reinforcing every shutter, every crack, every possible entry point for sun. The work kept her hands busy and her mind from spiraling into panic about vampire brothers and house politics and the fact that she was now lying to Priest Dada's desk approached. She positioned herself beside Cashin, with the remaining blood vials ready. She'd learned his pattern now. The moment the sun fully set, he would wake in pain, needing blood immediately to continue the purging. The sky outside turned purple, then indigo, then black, and Cashin's eyes snapped open with a gasp that sounded like drowning. Here, Alara had the vial ready, pressing it to his lips before he could speak. He drank desperately, his hands coming up to clutch hers, holding the glass steady as he swallowed. This time, the purging was worse. Black poison poured from him in waves, and he shook violently, silver eyes rolling back. Alara held him through it, whispering meaningless comforts, her dress soaking with corruption and bile. When it finally ended, they were both on the floor, breathing hard. Or rather, she was breathing. He was doing that thing where he mimicked breath, perhaps for her comfort. Your brother, she said into the silence. Kieran, he's in the village. Cashin's jaw tightened. Then we have less time than I thought. How much less? He met her eyes, and she saw the truth before he spoke it. He'll find us by tomorrow night. Maybe sooner. Alara looked at the scorched floor, the remaining vials, the vampire who'd bound his fate to hers. Then we'd better prepare. Chapter 5. Threads of Truth. Tell me how to kill a vampire. Cashin's head snapped up, silver eyes widening in genuine surprise. They sat on opposite sides of the priest's quarters, she on the narrow bed, he on the floor with his back against the wall. The second purging had left him weak but lucid, and Alara had decided that ignorance was more dangerous than any truth he might share. Why would you ask me that? His voice held no offense, only curiosity. Because Kieran is coming, and I can't protect you. Protect us if I don't know what we're facing. She met his gaze steadily. You said I needed to understand your world, so teach me. A slow smile curved his mouth, appreciative and dark. Most humans want to remain innocent of such knowledge. Most humans haven't granted sanctuary to a poisoned vampire lord while his brother hunts him through holy ground. She leaned forward. I stopped being innocent the moment I took your hand in that crypt. So stop protecting me from information and start preparing me for what's coming. Something shifted in his expression, respect, perhaps, or recognition. He nodded slowly. Very well. Lesson 1. We are extremely difficult to kill. He held up a hand, ticking off fingers. Sunlight will burn us to ash if exposure is prolonged, but brief contact only causes pain and surface damage. We heal quickly from most wounds, blades, bullets, blunt force. Unless the weapon is blessed, or the wound is made with intent backed by true faith. His jaw tightened. The old magic respects belief. A consecrated blade, in the hands of a genuine believer, will cut us as easily as it would cut you. A prayer spoken with conviction can hold us at bay. Alara absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. What about stakes through the heart? Garlic? Crosses? Theater and superstition, mostly. Cashin shifted, wincing as the movement pulled at something internal. A wooden stake will certainly immobilize us if it pierces the heart. Anything that destroys the heart will. But it must be precise, and the wood doesn't matter. Iron works just as well. As for garlic, he made a dismissive gesture. Unpleasant smell. Nothing more. Crosses only hold power if the wielder has faith behind them. Otherwise, they're simply metal or wood. And decapitation? Fatal, obviously. A dark humor colored his tone. We're not immortal in the sense your stories suggest. We can be killed. We simply heal from most attempts. She filed this away, already forming plans she didn't want to examine too closely. What about your brother specifically? What makes him more dangerous than you? Cashin's expression shuddered. Kieran is 3 centuries older than I am. Ancient blood runs stronger, heals faster, commands more influence over the lesser houses. He paused, something raw flickering behind his control. And he's had those 3 centuries to perfect the art of manipulation. He'll charm you, make you doubt me, offer you safety if you'll simply step aside and let him enter. Can he compel me? Control my mind? No, Cashin shook his head firmly. That's another myth. We cannot command human will directly. We can persuade, seduce, intimidate, but the choice always remains yours. The old laws are very clear on this. Free will cannot be violated by the blood-cursed. His gaze intensified. But Kieran doesn't need compulsion. He's had centuries to study human nature. He'll find your weaknesses and exploit them with surgical precision. What are my weaknesses? She asked it challengingly, curious what he'd say. You're lonely. He said it gently, without cruelty. You've been betrayed by the people you trusted most. You're desperate for someone to see you as you actually are, not as a cautionary tale or object of pity. His silver eyes held hers. Kieran will offer you exactly that. He'll make you feel valued, understood, protected. And by the time you realize its performance, you'll already be considering his offer. The accuracy of it stole her breath. And what about you? What are you offering that's any different? Honesty. The word hung between them, sharp and unadorned. I'm not pretending to be anything but what I am. A poisoned vampire lord using you as shelter because I'm too weak to survive on my own. I'm offering you a terrible bargain with uncertain outcomes and guaranteed danger. He leaned forward slightly. But I'm not lying about it. And I won't pretend affection I don't feel to secure your loyalty. You don't feel affection? The question came out more stung than she'd intended. His expression softened unexpectedly. I feel gratitude, respect, curiosity about why you chose insanity over safety. He tilted his head, studying her. And something else I don't have words for yet. Something that started 3 months ago when I first heard your silent screaming and couldn't stop listening. Alara's throat tightened. That's not affection? I don't know what it is. Frustration edged his voice. I'm 500 years old, Alara. I've bedded countless humans, fed from thousands more, formed blood bonds and sworn oaths, and walked away from all of them without looking back. I don't form attachments. He spread his hands helplessly. But you're different. And I don't understand why. Which means I can't promise you anything except brutal honesty and whatever protection I can offer while poisoned and hunted. The rawness of the confession hung in the air between them. Outside, an owl called low and mournful. Tell me about House Noctis, Alara said finally, steering towards safer ground. Tell me what Kieran wants to take from you. Relief flickered across Cashin's features at the change of subject. House Noctis controls the Northern Territory's 3 cities, a dozen smaller holdings, trade routes that generate more wealth than most kingdoms. We hold 2 seats on the Night Council, which means we have significant influence over vampire law and politics. He paused. Kieran is my elder brother, but by the laws of succession, I inherited leadership when our father was killed in the last House War. Kieran has spent 2 centuries trying to take it back. Why does he want it so badly? Power, legacy, pride. Cashin's voice went flat. And because I represent everything he despises, a vampire lord who refuses to treat humans as cattle or playthings. Who insists on consent for feeding? Who's abolished the blood trade in our territories? Who advocates for peace between our world and yours? His silver eyes met hers. The old houses consider me weak, a half measure, an embarrassment to ancient tradition. Understanding crystallized. So killing you isn't just about succession. It's about erasing your reforms. Exactly. Bitter pride colored his tone. If I die, Kieran inherits. And the first thing he'll do is reinstate the blood farms, the compulsory tithes, the casual cruelty that made humans fear us for millennia. He leaned his head back against the wall. 300 years of work, gone in a night. Then we don't let you die. Alara said it with more confidence than she felt. Your optimism is touching. But he smiled when he said it. A real smile that transformed his face from cold marble to something almost human. It's not optimism. It's pragmatism. She stood, brushing dust from her ruined dress. You've given me information. Now I need supplies. The village will be closing shop soon, but I can make it if I hurry. Alara, I need more cloth to seal the shutters. Salt. If I can get it consecrated, salt will make a barrier, won't it? She was already planning, her mind finally engaged with something concrete. Holy water, if the church will give it. And food for myself, since I can't survive on stored blood. You're not going alone. Cashin struggled to stand, failed, and cursed softly. If Kieran spots you, he doesn't know what I look like. You said it yourself, I'm good at being invisible. She moved to the door, pausing to look back at him. Besides, you can barely stand. One of us needs to be functional, and right now, that's me. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the next wave of poison chose that moment to hit. He doubled over with a strangled sound, black veins flaring across his throat. Alara grabbed the next vial, helped him drink, held him through the shaking. When it passed, he looked up at her with exhausted silver eyes. Be careful, he whispered. Always am. She squeezed his cold hand once, then slipped out into the falling dusk. Behind her, she heard him call softly, liar. She smiled despite herself and headed toward the village, where her enemy's brother waited in the dark. Chapter 6. The brothers off Earth village market was closing when Alara arrived, merchants packing away their wares beneath oil lamps that swung in the evening breeze. She kept her hood up, moving quickly between stalls, purchasing what she needed with the few coins she had left: salt, candles, dried meat, bread that would last. She was reaching for a jar of preserves when a voice spoke behind her. Curious choices for a woman living alone, every muscle in her body locked. The voice was cultured, warm, with an undertone of amusement that somehow made it more dangerous. She turned slowly. The man standing 3 feet away could have been Cashin's twin, the same dark hair, the same aristocratic features, the same impossible stillness. But where Cashin's eyes burned silver, this man's were a deep, rich amber that caught the lamplight like honey. And where Cashin held himself with controlled isolation, this man radiated effortless charm. I'm sorry? She kept her voice steady, polite, unremarkable. Salt and candles. Holy provisions. His smile was disarming, friendly even. Either you're preparing for winter early, or you're sheltering someone who needs protection from things that go bump in the night. He tilted his head, amber eyes studying her with unsettling intensity. I'm Kieran Aldrich, and you must be Alara Thorne. Ice flooded her veins. She forced herself not to react, not to run. I don't believe we've met. No, but I've been asking about you. He moved closer, not threatening, just conversational, as if they were old friends. The jilted bride living above the bookshop. The woman who sells her dead grandmother's jewelry to pay a scoundrel's debts. The girl who visits ruins at twilight and returns with shadows under her eyes. His smile deepened. You've had a difficult few months, Miss Thorne. I'm truly sorry for your troubles. The sympathy in his voice sounded genuine. That made it worse. Thank you. She turned back to her purchases, trying to dismiss him. But I really should. You're sheltering my brother." The words dropped like stones into water, sending ripples through her carefully maintained composure. She met his gaze, saw the certainty there, and knew lying would only insult them both. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." Kieran's tone remained gentle, understanding. "And I respect your loyalty. Truly." Cashin has always had a gift for inspiring devotion in humans. He leaned against the merchant's stall, casual and utterly unthreatening. "But I wonder if he's been honest with you about what's really happening here. He told me you poisoned him. Did he tell you why?" Kieran's amber eyes held hers. "Did he explain that he's violated sacred house law? That he's endangered centuries of carefully maintained peace between our world and yours?" Despite herself, Alara hesitated. "What law?" "The law of separation." Kieran spoke as if explaining something unfortunate but necessary. "For 500 years, our houses have maintained clear boundaries. We don't interfere in human affairs, and in exchange, humans don't hunt us with the religious fervor they once did. Everyone stays in their lane. Everyone survives." He paused, letting the words sink in. Cashin has been breaking that law systematically, using house resources to influence human politics, manipulating trade agreements. Even, and this is the truly dangerous part, attempting to form alliances between vampire houses and human kingdoms. That sounds like peace building, not law-breaking. It sounds like treason. Kieran's voice hardened slightly, the first crack in his charming facade. The Night Council voted unanimously to censure him. He ignored the censure and continued his experiments. So the council authorized me to contain the situation. By poisoning him? By enforcing consequences he refused to accept voluntarily. Kieran straightened, his expression turning earnest. "I don't want to kill my brother, Miss Thorne. I want to bring him before the council, let him face proper judgment, and prevent a war that would devastate both our peoples." He took a step closer. "But if he's purging the poison in consecrated ground, he's buying time to recover his strength and flee, which means more chaos, more violations, more innocent people caught in the crossfire of his idealism." Alara's mind raced, trying to separate truth from manipulation. Everything Kieran said sounded reasonable, logical, concerned. But she remembered Cashin's warning. "He'll charm you, make you doubt me." "What do you want from me?" she asked carefully. "Tell me where he is." Kieran's amber eyes held hers, warm and pleading. "Let me take him peacefully before House Morrigan sends their hunters. Those creatures won't care about sanctuary or human witnesses. They'll burn the entire chapel to ash and everyone in it." His voice dropped, intimate and urgent. "I can protect you, Alara, give you gold, enough to start fresh anywhere you want. All I need is your permission to cross the threshold and retrieve my brother. Your permission." The words resonated strangely. She remembered Cashin explaining the old law's invitation, consent, free will that couldn't be violated. "And if I refuse?" Something flickered in Kieran's expression, annoyance, quickly masked. "Then House Morrigan arrives tomorrow night, and you die alongside him in holy fire." He spread his hands, apologetic. "I'm trying to save you both, but I can't help if you won't let me." Alara looked into his amber eyes and saw centuries of practiced sincerity staring back. He was good, maybe even better than Cashin had warned. Every instinct screamed that he was telling some version of the truth, but truth and honesty weren't the same thing. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course." Kieran reached into his coat and produced a card, cream-colored, elegant, with an address written in flowing script. "I'm staying at the Rose and Thorn Inn, room 7. Come find me when you're ready to make the sensible choice." He pressed the card into her hand, his fingers cold as winter stone. "I truly hope you do, Miss Thorne. I'd hate to see someone as resilient as you burned alive for a lost cause." He actually bowed and disappeared into the evening crowd with inhuman grace. Alara stood frozen, card clutched in trembling fingers, trying to process everything he'd said. The merchants were closing up around her, packing away the last of their goods. She paid for her purchases mechanically and started the walk back to Steedy Morwin's. The night felt darker now, more dangerous. By the time she reached the chapel, full dark had fallen. She slipped through the nave, past broken saints that seemed to watch her with knowing eyes, and into the priest's quarters. Cashin was exactly where she'd left him, slumped against the wall. But his eyes tracked her immediately, sharp despite his weakness. "You met him. It wasn't a question." She set down her parcels and showed him the card. He said you're breaking sacred house law, that the Night Council authorized him to stop you. That house. Morgan will burn this place down if you don't surrender. She sank onto the bed, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Is any of that true? Cashin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. Yes. The simple admission hit harder than elaborate justifications would have. So you've been lying to me. No, he met her gaze steadily. I've been selective with truth because dumping 5 centuries of vampire politics on you while you're helping me purge poison seemed cruel. He shifted, wincing. But you asked, so here's the full truth. Yes, I've been breaking the law of separation. Yes, the Night Council censured me. And yes, Kieran has authorization to bring me in for judgment. Then why resist? Frustration sharpened her voice. If you're guilty, why not face consequences? Because the council is corrupt. Steel entered his tone. Half its members still believe humans are cattle. They upheld the law of separation not to protect humans, but to keep them ignorant and compliant. His silver eyes blazed. I'm breaking their precious law because it's a tool of oppression disguised as peace. And if I surrender to Kieran, he'll make sure I never threaten their power structure again, by killing you, legally. Bitter humor colored his words. After a fair trial, of course. With witnesses and proper procedure, and all the theater of justice, Alara rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of impossible choices pressing down. And House Morgan, will they really burn this place? Yes. No hesitation. They're the enforcers. If Kieran fails to bring me in, they'll eliminate the problem permanently. He paused. Which is why I told you to run if they come. No one should die for my idealism. Bit late for that. She looked at the scorched floor, the blood vials, the vampire who'd bound his survival to her choices. I already made my decision in the crypt. You can unmake it. He said it softly, urgently. Go to Kieran tonight. Tell him where I am. Take his gold and his protection and walk away. Is that what you want? I want you to live. That's not what I asked. She leaned forward, holding his gaze. Do you want me to betray you? Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Finally, Cashin shook his head. No, he whispered. God help me, no, then we see this through. Alara stood, unpacking her supplies with renewed purpose. We have one day before House Morgan arrives. So teach me everything I need to know to survive what's coming. Cashin looked at her like she was something miraculous and terrifying. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he said quietly, or the most foolish. Probably both. She offered him a tired smile. Now stop wasting time and start teaching. Chapter 7. The Seagoth lesson began at midnight. Cashin had recovered enough strength to stand, though he moved carefully, conserving energy for what was coming. Alara had sealed every crack in the shutters with salt-soaked cloth and arranged candles in protective circles, half-remembered rituals from her grandmother's stories. Probably useless, but comforting nonetheless. They'll come at dusk tomorrow, Cashin said, sketching a crude map of the chapel grounds on the dusty floor with his finger. House Morgan doesn't waste time on strategy, they overwhelm with numbers and violence. Expect at least 6 hunters, possibly more, 6 vampires. Alara tried to keep her voice steady. And we're 2, one of whom is poison. Actually, we're 1.5. Dark humor touched his smile. I can fight, but not for long. The poison has weakened me considerably. He tapped the map. Our advantage is the consecrated ground. They can't cross the threshold without invitation, and they can't sustain prolonged contact with blessed surfaces, so we stay inside and wait them out. They'll burn us out, he said it matter-of-factly. Fire isn't holy. They'll torch the building and wait for us to flee or die. That's a terrible plan. It's their plan. Ours needs to be better. He looked up at her, silver eyes intense. Can you shoot a gun? She blinked. I've never even held one. Crossbow then. Arrows. He stood, moving to a section of wall where wooden beams had rotted. With inhuman strength, he tore a beam free and began fashioning it into something resembling a stake. We need weapons you can actually use. Things that don't require vampire strength or speed. Alara watched him work, his movements efficient despite obvious pain. You said wood doesn't matter. That iron works just as well. For killing, yes. But for slowing them down, he tested the point against his palm, drawing a thin line of black blood. Wood from holy ground carries enough blessing to hurt. Not permanently, but enough to give you time to run. I'm not running. Alara, we've had this argument. She took the stake from him, feeling its weight. Teach me where to aim instead of trying to convince me to abandon you. Something shifted in his expression, resignation mixed with fierce pride. The heart, obviously, but it has to be precise. Miss by even inches and you'll only enrage them. He turned, indicating his own chest. Here, between the fourth and fifth rib, angled slightly upward. One solid thrust. She pressed the stake against the spot he'd indicated, feeling the coldness of him through his shirt. And if I can't get that close? The throat. It won't kill, but it will slow their healing enough to give you advantage. His hand covered hers on the stake, guiding it upward. Straight through the windpipe. Don't hesitate. Don't pull back once you've committed. His palm was ice against her skin, but somehow the touch steadied her. She met his eyes so close now, burning silver in the candlelight. I won't hesitate, she promised. I know. His voice had gone soft, strange. That's what terrifies me. They spent the next hours preparing. Cashin fashioned more stakes while Alara practiced striking at chalk marks he'd drawn on the wall, heart height, throat height, again and again until her arms ached. He taught her to move low, to use doorways as choke points, to strike and retreat rather than engage directly. You're not trying to win fights, he emphasized. You're trying to survive long enough for me to eliminate the real threats. And if you can't, then you run to the catacombs and hide in the deepest chamber. It's too narrow for them to follow easily, and the blessing is strongest there. His jaw tightened. Promise me you'll run if I fall. No, Alara, I said no. She planted another stake, harder than necessary. You don't get to sacrifice yourself and expect me to just accept it. We survive together or not at all. That's not rational, smart, safe. She whirled on him. Nothing about this situation is any of those things. But I'm done with people making decisions for me. Thomas decided I wasn't worth keeping. The village decided I was worth pitying. You don't get to decide I'm worth saving at the cost of your life. Her voice cracked. I choose to stay. That's my decision. Respect it. Cashin stared at her, something raw and wounded in his silver eyes. Then, without warning, he closed the distance between them and cupped her face in his cold hands. You're extraordinary, he whispered. Absolutely extraordinary. And it's going to get you killed. Maybe. She didn't pull away. But at least I'll die making my own choices. For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. His gaze dropped to her mouth, and she felt the tension coil between them, dangerous and electric and utterly inappropriate given that they were preparing for a siege. Then a sound shattered the moment, glass breaking. Not in their chamber, but somewhere in the chapel's western wing. Cashin's entire body went rigid. They're early, he breathed. They're not waiting for dusk, they're coming now. But the sun cloud cover, heavy enough to risk it. He grabbed her shoulders, urgency replacing tenderness. Get to the nave. Create a choke point at the eastern entrance. Don't let them surround you. What about you? I'll come from behind. Trap them between us. He pressed a stake into her hand. Remember, heart or throat. Don't hesitate. More glass shattered. Closer now. And then a voice, smooth, cultured, achingly familiar. Cashin. Brother, I gave you a chance to surrender peacefully. Why do you always insist on making things difficult? Kieran, Alara met Cashin's eyes, saw her own shock reflected there. He brought House Morgan himself? He is House Morgan. Understanding and betrayal twisted Cashin's features. He's been working with them from the beginning. The poison, the assassination attempt, all of it. His voice turned to ice. My brother just declared war on House Noctis. Footsteps echoed through the chapel, multiple sets, moving with predatory coordination. And underneath it, a new sound, crackling flames. They were burning the western wing. Go, Cashin commanded. Now, Alara ran, stake clutched in white-knuckled hands, toward the nave where shadows moved with inhuman grace. Behind her, she heard Cashin follow, felt rather than saw him melt into darkness, becoming something other than the careful, controlled creature she'd been nursing. She reached the eastern entrance just as a figure emerged from the smoke. Not Kieran. Someone else, a woman with pale skin and red eyes that glowed like embers. She smiled when she saw Alara, revealing fangs that dripped with anticipation. Well, the human pet. How delicious. Alara adjusted her grip on the stake, remembering Cashin's lessons. Heart or throat. Don't hesitate. The vampire lunged. Alara dropped low exactly as Cashin had taught her and thrust upward with everything she had. The stake punched through the woman's chest with a sickening crack, and the vampire's eyes went wide with shock. Not the heart. Too far left. But enough. The woman staggered back, clawing at the wood protruding from her ribs. Black blood poured from the wound, hissing where it hit the consecrated floor. You little. Cashin materialized behind her like nightmare-made flesh, and tore her head from her shoulders in one savage motion. The body crumbled to ash before it hit the ground. He looked at Alara over the dissolving remains, and his eyes blazed silver white with something terrifying and beautiful. One down, he said softly. 5 to go. Then the chapel exploded with violence, and Alara learned what it meant to fight beside a vampire lord pushed beyond restraint. Chapter 8. Blood and Ash's next vampire came through the smoke like a phantom, moving faster than Alara's eyes could track. She barely had time to raise her stake before Cashin intercepted, catching the creature mid-leap and slamming it into a stone pillar with enough force to crack the ancient mortar. They moved together with savage efficiency, Cashin's hands around the vampire's throat, crushing, while Alara drove her stake between its ribs. The creature screamed, a sound that echoed off the ruined walls like breaking glass, before dissolving into ash. 2, Cashin said, breathing hard. Black veins had spread further across his throat, the poison flaring with each expenditure of energy. Stay close to me. Don't. Fire exploded through the western wall. Real fire this time, not just smoke. Flames roared into the nave with unnatural hunger, eating through centuries-old wood like paper. The heat hit Alara in a wave, stealing her breath, driving them back toward the eastern wing. 3 figures emerged through the inferno, untouched by flames. 2 men and another woman, their eyes glowing red with bloodlust. House Morrigan's hunters, and they weren't bothering with subtlety anymore. The girl first, one of them said, grinning. Make him watch. They split up with practiced coordination, 2 circling left, 1 right, cutting off escape routes. Cashin moved to intercept, but the poison had weakened him. He was fast, but not fast enough. One of the hunters slipped past his guard and lunged for Alara. She threw herself sideways, hit the floor hard, rolled. The vampire's claws raked the stone where her head had been, gouging deep scratches. She came up with her stake ready, but the creature was already on her again. Impossibly quick. Got you. A chunk of burning wood smashed into the vampire's skull. Alara had grabbed it without thinking, her hand already blistering from the heat. The vampire recoiled with a shriek, and she used the opening, drove her stake into its throat exactly as Cashin had taught her. Straight through the windpipe, the creature staggered, choking on its own black blood. Not dead, but immobilized. Cashin appeared behind it and finished what she'd started, tearing it apart with brutal efficiency. 3, he gasped, and Alara saw the toll it was taking. His movements had slowed. The black veins covered half his face now, pulsing with poison. Alara, you need to. Behind you. He spun, but not fast enough. The female hunter's blade blessed silver, Alara realized, with horror sliced across his shoulder. Cashin's scream echoed through the burning chapel as the wound sizzled, refusing to heal. There you are, the woman purred. The great reformer. So weak now, so pathetic. She raised her blade for a killing strike. Alara threw her stake. It wasn't a great throw. Her grandmother had never taught her that particular skill. But desperation gave it force, and luck gave it accuracy. The wooden point caught the vampire in the side of the neck, making her flinch just enough. Cashin used the opening. He caught the woman's wrist, twisted, and drove her own blessed blade through her heart. She had time for one shocked gasp before crumbling to ash. 4. Cashin collapsed against a pew, clutching his wounded shoulder. Black blood seeped between his fingers, mixing with the poison that was slowly killing him from the inside. 4 down. To left, plus Kieran, Alara reminded him, helping him stay upright. The fire had spread to the roof now, and burning debris rained down around them. They needed to move, but Cashin could barely stand. Kieran won't fight directly. Cashin's voice had gone raspy, strained. He'll let the hunters soften us up first. He's always been pragmatic. Kieran's voice drifted through the smoke and flames, cultured and calm. I prefer the term strategic, brother. Why risk myself when I have perfectly good subordinates? He emerged from the burning nave like something from a nightmare, amber eyes reflecting the flames. The 2 remaining hunters flanked him, both large, both armed with blessed blades that gleamed in the firelight. This has gone on long enough, Kieran said, almost bored. You're dying anyway, Cashin. The poison sees to that. Surrender now, and I'll let the girl live. She can walk away with enough gold to forget this unfortunate incident. Don't believe him, Cashin warned, trying to stand. His legs buckled. He'll kill you the moment I'm dead. Witnesses are inconvenient. Yes, Kieran smiled pleasantly. But I'm trying to be merciful here. Miss Thorne, you've shown remarkable courage. Misguided, certainly, but remarkable. Don't throw your life away for a lost cause. Alara looked at Cashin poisoned, wounded, barely conscious. Looked at the two hunters with their blessed blades. Looked at Kieran, who radiated centuries of power and absolute confidence in his victory. Then she looked at the fire consuming the chapel. At the way the flames danced around certain areas, avoiding the most consecrated spaces. An idea sparked. Desperate and probably insane. I have a counteroffer, she said, standing between Cashin and his enemies. Her voice shook, but she forced it steady. You leave now, and I don't burn this entire chapel down on top of all of us. Kieran laughed, genuinely amused. Burn it down? My dear girl, we've already started that process. You'd only be helping us, not the outer walls. Alara grabbed one of the candles from her protective circle, its flame blessed by her grandmother's prayers. The catacombs, the deepest chambers where the first priests were buried, where the bones of saints rest in consecrated earth. She met his amber eyes. I'll collapse the floor, drop us all into the most holy ground in this entire structure. You'll burn from the inside out before you can escape. The hunters shifted uncomfortably. Even Kieran's smile faltered slightly. You'd die too, he pointed out. Yes, she said it simply, without hesitation. But you'd die first. And your precious House Morgan would lose 3 of its hunters and its newest ally, all because you were too arrogant to walk away. Silence, broken only by the roar of flames. Kieran studied her with new interest, his amusement fading to something more calculating. You're bluffing, am I? She moved the candle toward a particularly damaged section of floor, where stone had cracked over the years. Test me. Behind her, Cashin made a sound, half laugh, half groan. She's not bluffing, he said, pride and horror mixing in his voice. She's absolutely not bluffing. Kieran's expression hardened. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his amber eyes. He looked at the fire, at the floor, at Alara standing there with her blessed candle and her complete willingness to die. You're mad, he said finally. I've been told that before. She held the candle steady. What's it going to be? Leave now, or burn with us. The calculation played out across Kieran's features, the odds, the risks, the potential gains versus catastrophic losses. House politics, warring with sibling rivalry, warring with simple self-preservation. Finally, he stepped back. This isn't over, he said coldly. The Night Council will hear of your violations, brother. And next time, his gaze cut to Alara. Next time, I won't be so merciful. He gestured to his hunters. They hesitated, clearly unwilling to leave prey wounded and vulnerable. But Kieran's authority was absolute. With visible reluctance, they melted back into the smoke and flames, moving with inhuman speed toward the exits. Within seconds, they were gone. Alara stood frozen, candle trembling in her grip, unable to believe it had worked. Behind her, Cashin made a choke sound that might have been relief or might have been the poison finally claiming him. Alara, she turned just as he collapsed completely, his silver eyes rolling back. The black veins covered his entire face now, pulsing with poison that had spread too far, too fast. The fire roared around them, consuming the chapel with increasing hunger. Smoke filled her lungs, making each breath agony. She grabbed Cashin under the arms and dragged him toward the eastern wing, toward the priest's quarters that weren't yet burning. Her muscles screamed. Her burned hand shrieked protest. But she didn't stop, couldn't stop, because she hadn't saved him from his brother just to let him die in flames. They made it through the door. She slammed it shut behind them, stuffing rags into the gaps to keep out smoke. Then she collapsed beside him, coughing, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Cashin's eyes fluttered open barely. You threatened to kill us both. I did. Her voice came out hoarse from smoke. You magnificent, insane. He couldn't finish the sentence. His eyes closed again, and for a terrible moment, she thought he'd stopped breathing entirely. Then she remembered. He didn't breathe anyway. Outside, the chapel continued to burn, and dawn was less than an hour away. Chapter 9. The quiet after Alara worked through the night with desperate efficiency. The fire had consumed most of the chapel, but the eastern wing, built against older foundations, constructed with stones blessed by generations of prayer, had held. Barely. Smoke damage blackened the walls, and the air reeked of char and ash, but the roof remained intact. The shutters she'd sealed so carefully still blocked the approaching dawn. Cashin lay motionless on the narrow bed, his skin gray as tombstone. The black veins had spread everywhere now across his face, down his neck, disappearing beneath his shirt to map his entire body with poison. His chest didn't rise or fall. His hands lay open at his sides, palms up, fingers slightly curled. He looked dead. He's not dead, she told herself firmly. He's purging. This is part of the process. But he'd never been this still before. Even in day sleep, there'd been some quality of presence, of consciousness, locked away, but still existing. Now he felt hollow, as if something essential had fled and might not return. She had 2 blood vials left. The realization hit her like cold water. 2 vials to last through. However many days remained of the purging process. Maybe 3 days. Maybe more. And she had no way to get more blood, no way to even know where Cashin had obtained his reserves in the first place. Think, she commanded herself. You didn't threaten to burn everyone alive just to lose him to starvation. Her burned hand throbbed where she'd grabbed the flaming wood. She'd wrapped it in torn cloth soaked in water from the old well, but infection was already setting in. Her entire body ached from fighting, from dragging Cashin's dead weight, from breathing smoke for hours. None of it mattered. She forced herself to inventory what they had left: 2 vials of blood, a few steaks, salt, candles, dried food and water for herself, the clothes on her back and a vampire who might not wake up. She laughed, a cracked, slightly hysterical sound that echoed in the damaged room. This is insane, she told his unhearing form. You know that, right? All of this. I should have taken Kieran's gold and run to the next kingdom. Cashin's face remained marble still, offering no response. But I didn't. She sat on the edge of the bed, exhaustion finally catching up with her. And I won't, because apparently I've decided that a poisoned vampire lord is worth more than safety or sanity or any of the reasonable choices I could have made. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Because you called my name in the dark, and I finally felt like someone was actually listening. Outside, birds began their dawn chorus. The sound filtered through cracks in the shutters, normal, mundane. Completely at odds with the supernatural carnage of the previous night, Alara stood, forcing her body to move despite every muscle's protest. She needed to assess the damage, see if the chapel was even defensible anymore. If Kieran returned, and he would return. She had no illusions about that. They needed to know what resources remained. She left Cashin in the shuttered darkness, and ventured into the nave. The sight stole her breath. The western half of the chapel had been completely destroyed. Roof beams lay scattered like broken bones, and the walls had collapsed inward, leaving only skeletal arches pointing at the morning sky. Ash covered everything, gray and thick, drifting in the breeze that now moved freely through spaces that should have been enclosed. But the eastern half, the older section, the original chapel built on ancient foundations, had survived. Scorched and damaged, but standing. The stone altar still stood in its alcove, untouched by flames. The catacombs entrance yawned open. Stairs, descending into blessed darkness. She'd destroyed a historical landmark and nearly gotten them both killed, and she'd do it again in a heartbeat. The thought should have horrified her. Instead, she felt a strange lightness, as if some weight she'd been carrying for months had finally lifted. She'd made a choice, a terrible, dangerous, completely insane choice, and owned it entirely. No one had forced her. No one had manipulated her. She'd stood in front of ancient vampires and threatened to take them all down, and she'd meant it. Thomas had never inspired that kind of conviction in her. Neither had the village, her reputation, or any of the careful plans she'd built for a respectable, predictable life. But Cashin wounded, impossible. Honest, Cashin had somehow given her back something she'd thought lost forever. Her spine. Miss Thorne? She spun, heart lurching, to find Father Benedict standing at the chapel's ruined entrance. His face was pale with shock as he took in the destruction. What happened here? He asked, moving carefully through the debris. We saw smoke last night, but by the time we organized help, the fire had already died down. I thought. He stopped, eyes widening. Dear God, were you inside when it burned? Alara's mind raced. She needed a story, something plausible. Something that wouldn't lead to more questions. I was in the eastern wing when it started, she said, letting exhaustion make her voice shake. Not difficult. I think lightning struck the western roof. Everything went up so fast. I barely made it out. Father Benedict hurried forward, taking in her burned hand, her smoke-stained dress, the cuts and bruises covering her exposed skin. You need medical attention. Come back to the village, Mrs. Hemlock will have supplies. I'm fine here. The response came too quickly, too sharp. She softened it with a weak smile. I just need rest. The eastern wing is still intact, and I'd rather not face everyone's questions right now. The priest studied her with concern that made guilt twist in her stomach. He was a good man, genuinely worried. And she was lying to his face to protect a vampire who'd violated laws older than kingdoms. At least let me bring you fresh water and bandages, he insisted. And food. You can't stay here without supplies. That's very kind. She needed him to leave before Cashin woke, before anything else went wrong. Perhaps this afternoon? I'd like to rest first. Father Benedict hesitated, clearly torn between concern and propriety. Finally, he nodded. I'll return at midday. Please, Miss Thorne, if you need anything before then, don't hesitate to send word. She promised she would, walked him to the ruined entrance, and watched until he disappeared down the overgrown path. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. Midday. She had until midday before the village descended with help and questions and scrutiny. She couldn't afford. She returned to the priest's quarters to find Cashin exactly as she'd left him, gray still, suspended in that terrible space between life and death. She uncorked one of the precious remaining vials and carefully parted his lips, letting the blood trickle into his mouth. His throat worked reflexively, swallowing. But his eyes didn't open, and no purging followed. The poison had spread too far, too deep. His body was barely functioning, focused entirely on survival rather than healing. Come on, she whispered, pressing her fingers to his cold wrist. You don't get to die after I threaten to collapse a chapel on everyone. That would be terribly anticlimactic. No response. Not even the flicker of consciousness she'd seen before. Panic threatened to swallow her. She forced it down, forced herself to think. He needed blood more than the vials could provide. He needed strength to fight the poison. He needed. Her gaze fell on her own bandaged hand, where blood had seeped through the makeshift wrapping. No, she thought immediately. That's insane. You don't know what feeding a vampire does, what it costs, what it means. But Cashin had said it himself. He needed blood to heal. His reserves were gone, and there was only one source left available. Alara looked at her wrapped hand, then at Cashin's gray face, and made another terrible choice. She unwrapped the bandage, exposing her burned and bleeding palm. Then she pressed it to his mouth. Don't make me regret this, she whispered, for 3 heartbeats. Nothing happened. Then his lips moved against her skin, and she felt the pull, gentle at first, then stronger, like a tide drawing her down into dark water. It didn't hurt. That was the strangest part. It felt intimate, invasive, and strangely peaceful all at once. His hand came up slowly, wrapping around her wrist. Not forcing, just holding, anchoring them both as he drank. The black veins on his face began to recede. Alara watched, fascinated and terrified, as color slowly returned to his skin, not warmth exactly, but something closer to life. The gray pallor faded. His chest began to rise and fall in that mimicry of breath, and his eyes opened, silver bright and blazing with awareness. They locked on hers with an intensity that stole her remaining breath. He pulled back from her palm immediately, horror and hunger warring in his expression. Alara, he gasped. What did you? Why would you? You were dying. She said it simply, swaying slightly from blood loss. And I had a spare. He stared at her like she'd performed a miracle or committed blasphemy, possibly both. You foolish, extraordinary. He stopped, unable to find words. Then he pulled her down beside him and held her, cold and careful and utterly silent. Outside, the sun climbed higher, and in the ruined chapel, 2 impossible people held each other and tried to understand what they'd just done. Chapter 10. The choice. At dawn, 3 days passed in careful silence. Father Benedict returned with supplies, as promised, his eyes full of questions. Alara deflected with exhausted smiles and vague explanations. The village council discussed rebuilding. St. Morwins argued about historical significance versus cost, while Alara and Cashin hid in the eastern wing like secrets. The old stones refused to surrender. Cashin grew stronger. The black veins faded completely by the 2nd day, and by the 3rd, he could stand without wavering, move without wincing. The poison had finally purged from his system, leaving him weakened but whole. He didn't ask to feed from her again. She didn't offer. The memory of it hung between them, intimate and unspoken. A line they'd crossed that neither knew how to uncross. On the fourth morning, Alara woke to find him standing at the shuttered window, one hand pressed against the wood as if he could feel the sunlight beyond. "It's over," he said quietly. "The purging is complete. I'm recovered enough to travel." She sat up slowly, her bandaged hand aching. "Travel where?" "North. Back to House Noctis territory." He didn't turn around. "Kieran's alliance with House Morrigan changes everything. The Night Council will have to choose sides, back my reforms or support his return to the old ways. It's going to be ugly. A war. Yes." Finally, he looked at her, silver eyes shadowed. "A war I can't ask you to be part of." There it was. The thing they'd been dancing around for days. The inevitable ending where the vampire lord returned to his world and the human woman returned to hers. Alara's throat tightened. "Is that what you want? For me to go back to my small room and smaller life? I want you to be safe." His voice carried the weight of centuries. "I want you to have a normal existence, marriage, children, growing old surrounded by people who love you. The mortal things I can never give you. I don't want those things." The words came out sharper than intended. "I had that life planned out. Thomas, the bakery we'd run together, children named after grandparents. I had it all mapped out, and it was a lie built on theft and betrayal." She stood, facing him across the small room. "You think I want to go back to that? To pretending I'm content with ordinary when I've seen," she gestured helplessly. "When I've seen this. This is danger and darkness and isolation." Cashin moved toward her, intense and urgent. "This is centuries of watching everyone you love wither and die while you remain unchanged. This is being feared, hunted, bound by laws written in blood and enforced by creatures who make Kieran look merciful." He cupped her face gently, his touch still cold. "I've lived 500 years, Alara. I know exactly what I'm offering you and what I'm taking away." "Then offer it." She met his gaze steadily. "Stop deciding what I can handle and let me choose. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me." She grabbed his wrist, holding him there. "You said you'd give me a choice when this was over. Mortality or what? What's the alternative, Cashin?" He pulled away, pacing to the window and back, agitated in a way she'd never seen him. "Immortality. Through the blood bond. If you drink from me 3 times under the full moon, with full knowledge and consent, you'd begin the transformation. Your heart would slow, your body would change, you'd develop our strengths and our hungers." He stopped, forcing himself to look at her. "You'd become what I am, forever." The word hung in the air like a promise and a curse. "And if I refuse?" Alara asked. "If I choose mortality? Then I give you gold, enough to start fresh anywhere you want. I make sure you're protected, comfortable, safe." His voice went soft, pained. "And I never contact you again. Because watching you age, knowing every year brings you closer to death. While I remain." He stopped, jaw tight. "I can't do that to either of us. So my choices are eternal life with you, or comfortable abandonment." Bitterness crept into her tone. "Those aren't really choices, Cashin. I know." The admission came raw. "I know, and I'm sorry. But those are the only options that end without one of us destroying the other." He moved closer, desperate now. "If you stay human and stay with me, I'll watch you die. I'll measure every gray hair, every line that appears on your beautiful face, and I'll hate myself for stealing your mortal years. And you will grow old knowing I don't, that I'll attend your funeral looking exactly as I do now." His voice cracked. "That's not love, Alara. That's torture for us both." She wanted to argue, to find a third option he hadn't considered. But the mathematics of mortality versus immortality were brutally simple. There was no compromise, no middle ground. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked quietly. "The next full moon is in 3 weeks." He reached into his coat and produced a small velvet pouch, heavy with coin. "Enough gold to disappear if you choose. To build whatever life you want, wherever you want it." He placed it on the table between them. "I'll return on the full moon. If you're here, if you've decided you want eternity, then we'll begin the transformation. And if I'm not here," pain flickered across his features, "then I'll know you chose wisely, and I'll honor that choice by staying away." Alara picked up the pouch, felt its weight. Enough gold to buy a shop, hire staff, recreate the life Thomas had stolen. Enough to be comfortable, respectable, safe. Enough to forget she'd ever threatened to collapse a chapel on a vampire's head. 3 weeks, she repeated. 3 weeks. He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, you saved my life. Multiple times. You faced down creatures that have hunted for centuries, and you never flinched. He stopped, searching for words. You're the bravest person I've ever known. And whatever you decide, I'm honored to have met you, Alara Thorne. Cashin, but he was already gone, melting into the morning shadows with the speed she'd almost forgotten he possessed. One moment present, the next simply absent, as if he'd never existed at all. Alara stood alone in the damaged priest's quarters, gold in one hand and impossible choices weighing on her heart. 3 weeks later, the full moon rose over Steedy, Morwen's ruins, painting everything in silver light. The village had voted to demolish what remained of the chapel, too expensive to restore, too dangerous to leave standing. The work would begin next week. Alara stood in the eastern wing, her few possessions packed in a small bag. She'd spent the weeks thinking, planning, weighing mortality against eternity with the careful attention of someone who knew the choice was irrevocable. She'd visited Thomas once, in the new home he shared with the merchant's daughter, seen his surprise at her calm demeanor, his discomfort when she forgave him for the theft and betrayal. She'd walked away feeling nothing, not anger, not grief, just a distant acknowledgement that he belonged to a life she'd already left behind. She'd said goodbye to Father Benedict, donated half the gold to his church for the poor, watched his tearful gratitude, and felt the weight of lying to him settle like stones. She'd stood at her grandmother's grave and told the old woman's ghost about vampires and blood oaths and choices that shouldn't exist, and now she waited. As moonlight pooled through the broken roof, Cashin appeared at midnight exactly, stepping through the ruined nave like something from a dark fairy tale. He'd dressed formally, black coat, silver buttons, his dark hair tied back to reveal the aristocratic planes of his face. He looked like what he was, a lord of ancient blood, powerful and dangerous and utterly controlled, until he saw her. Then relief and fear and desperate hope crashed across his features in rapid succession. You're here, he breathed. I'm here. Alara set down her bag and walked toward him, steady and certain. I choose eternity, Cashin. I choose your world, your darkness, your truth. She stopped inches away, looking up into his silver eyes. I choose you. You're certain? His hands hovered near her face, not quite touching. Once we begin, there's no going back. The transformation is permanent, I'm certain. She'd never been more certain of anything. I'm done with the daylight world, done with ordinary, done with being something small and pitied and invisible. She took his cold hands in her warm ones. Show me how to become extraordinary. Something broke in his expression, some final wall of control shattering. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. I'll teach you everything, he promised. The laws, the politics, the dangers. I'll show you centuries of accumulated knowledge. I'll introduce you to houses that predate your language. His voice dropped to a whisper. And I'll love you for every night of eternity, if you'll let me. That's a long time, she said, smiling. Yes, he pulled back enough to meet her eyes. Too long to spend alone. Then he kissed her finally, properly, and she tasted copper and night and promises that would outlast kingdoms. When they broke apart, he bit his own wrist, offered it to her with grave ceremony. 3 times under 3 full moons, he said softly. The first drink begins the change. Are you ready? Alara looked at the blood welling dark against his pale skin, looked at the ruined chapel that had sheltered them, looked at the vampire who'd called her name in darkness and given her back her spine. I'm ready. She pressed her lips to his wrist and drank deeply, tasting iron and magic and the first notes of forever. Outside, the village slept peacefully, unaware that one of their own was choosing immortality. And in the ruins of St. Morwen's chapel, where prayers had echoed for centuries, a new story began, written in blood and moonlight and the fierce conviction of a woman who'd finally found something worth keeping. The end. Alara Thorne chose eternity beside Cashin Aldrich, beginning her transformation into a vampire under 3 full moons. Together, they returned to House Noctis territory to face the brewing war between progressive and traditional vampire factions. She learned the ancient laws, developed her immortal strength, and stood beside Cashin as he rebuilt his house's power. Years later, when the Night Council finally fell to their reforms, witnesses claimed a human-turned-vampire with silver bright eyes and unshakable conviction had been the one to tip the balance, proving that sometimes the bravest thing a wounded heart can do is choose to heal in darkness rather than wither in unwanted light.